He left for a business trip. Then his mother-in-law said, "He's cheating on you. I have proof." Sunday evening. I'm sitting at the kitchen island watching Michael pack for his business trip. 5 days in Chicago, another tech conference, presenting some new software product. For him, it's routine. For me, it's 5 days of quiet in our suburban home. These days, I'm not even sure if that's good or bad. Michael called from the bedroom, asking where his navy blazer was. I answered automatically that it was in the closet on the left, while stirring my lukewarm tea. We've been married for 3 years. Once upon a time, I was captivated by his ambition, his intelligence, his drive. Now it sometimes feels like we're just roommates, each in our own corner of the house, each with our own plans and problems. Michael appeared in the kitchen holding his tie, asking for help. While I was tying the knot, I noticed a new cologne. I casually asked about it, trying to keep my voice light. He replied without meeting my eyes that he'd picked it up at the airport last week, wanted something fresh, added something about clients, and needing to make the right impression. When I asked which colleagues he was referring to, his expression immediately changed. He said with irritation, "Kate, what are you getting at?" In that tone suggesting I'm always suspicious, always the dissatisfied wife. The doorbell rang. From the distinctive pattern, 3 short rings, 1 long, I instantly knew who it was. Michael recognized it too and said, "Oh, Mom's here to say goodbye." With that special inflection he reserves only for talking about his mother. Judith is a woman with military posture and the eyes of a prosecutor, former corporate accountant. Retired now, but the eyes remain the same, seeing everything, especially what you'd prefer to hide. She hugged her son tightly, as if he were leaving for war rather than a conference. She bombarded him with questions. Had he packed everything, remembered his documents, reviewed his presentation? I stood to the side, as usual. For her, I've always been peripheral, decoration at best. I greeted her, receiving a curt nod in response. She only ever calls me Catherine, my full name, as if it's some form of punishment. She announced she'd brought muffins for Mikey, and after a noticeable pause added, "And for you, of course." I took the heavy container and went to the kitchen. From the hallway, I could hear their voices, hushed but distinct. Always like this, as if I'm not there, as if I shouldn't hear. Michael asked his mother to be gentler with me. She responded with genuine surprise that she hadn't said anything wrong, even brought muffins, trying to take care of me, but I was always turning up my nose. Michael sighed. This conversation repeats before each of his trips, almost like a ritual. Then he said he needed to go. The Uber was waiting. I returned from the kitchen. Michael kissed me, quickly, formally, as if checking a box. Said he'd call when he landed and asked me to see his mother out. The door closed. Judith and I were left alone, a situation we both carefully avoid. I asked if she'd like some tea, knowing the answer. She declined, saying she should go too. Reminded me to check that the windows were locked when I leave, and to water the plants because Mikey loves when the house is in order. I nodded and walked her to the door. When I closed it behind her, I felt a strange relief, as if the air in the house had become cleaner. 5 days of quiet and freedom, without evaluating glances, without the constant need to measure up. I returned to the kitchen and opened the container of muffins. They were perfect, as always, golden brown, precisely shaped. Judith is flawless even in this. That's exactly what drives me crazy. Her perfection, next to which I always feel inadequate. Mikey likes it this way. Mikey is used to having it differently. These phrases have haunted me from the first day I met her. My phone rang. The display showed Michael. He said he was at the airport but had forgotten his presentation on a flash drive. Asked me to find it in his desk drawer, in the blue folder, and email it to him. I agreed and went to his home office. His desk drawer was an entire filing system, everything arranged in labeled folders. I was the one who taught Michael to be organized, though Judith is convinced it's her doing. I found the blue folder and opened it. Among the documents, I spotted an unfamiliar envelope, pink with glitter. I opened it. Inside was a card with hearts and a handwritten message. Thanks for the magical evening. Looking forward to seeing you again. Love, E. My heart skipped a beat. Who was E? Why was she thanking my husband for a magical evening? I thought maybe it was an old card from before we met, but looking at the postmark date, I saw 2 weeks ago. I retrieved the flash drive, closed the folder, and put everything back. My hands were shaking as I sent the email with the presentation. I wrote, "Found it. Safe travels. Love you." That night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts circled around that card. E. Who was she? Emma? Elizabeth? Ellie? Michael doesn't have colleagues with these names. I would know. I told myself not to make things up. It could be anything. A thank you from a client, from an intern. Michael has a responsible position. He helps many people. But another part of me, the part that had noticed new colognes, late returns, emotional distance in recent months, whispered, "You've suspected this for a while. Why are you pretending to be surprised now?" Monday passed in a blur of work. I'm an editor at a small publishing house, currently finishing a textbook project. Michael called in the evening, talked about the conference, how the presentation went. His voice was upbeat but detached. Or did it just seem that way after yesterday's discovery? He asked if everything was okay. I said I was just working, meeting a deadline on the textbook. He noted that I sounded strange. I told him I was just tired. Asked how his hotel was. He replied it was fine, standard room, nothing special. Then there was a pause. Michael asked again if everything was all right. I said yes, just missing him. He said he missed me too and asked if we'd talk tomorrow. I agreed. After the call, I sat staring at the dark phone screen for a long time. Strangely, I really did miss him. Despite our growing distance lately, despite my suspicions. Or was I missing what we used to have? The certainty? The trust? Tuesday passed in a fog of thoughts. I returned from work late and saw a familiar figure at the entrance to our building, Judith. She rarely comes without warning, especially when Michael is away. I asked if something had happened. She gave me that special look that always makes me feel guilty and said we needed to talk. In the elevator, we were silent. I ran through possibilities in my head. Had Michael been in an accident? Was she having health problems? Why this sudden visit? At home, I offered tea. This time, she accepted. We sat in the kitchen. I filled the silence with meaningless chatter about work, the weather. Finally, she interrupted me and said directly, "He's cheating on you. I have proof." My cup froze halfway to my lips. Strangely, my first feeling wasn't shock or pain, but irritation. Again, She's interfering in our lives. Again, trying to control everything, manage everyone. I asked what made her think that. Judith took her phone from her purse and showed me a photograph. On the screen, Michael embracing a young woman. They're at the entrance to some restaurant. The woman is attractive, red-haired, stylishly dressed. I'd never seen her before. My mother-in-law said this was Emily, that she works for a competing company. She added that she'd accidentally seen them last Thursday when she went to the same restaurant with a friend. I stared at the photo. They looked happy. I hadn't seen Michael look like that in a long time. I tried to object, saying it could be a business meeting. Judith countered that business meetings don't end with kisses in the parking lot. I was silent, trying to process the information. Had Judith been following them, taking photos secretly? This felt surreal. I asked why she was showing me this. Was it to enjoy my humiliation? She looked genuinely surprised and replied that she wanted me to know the truth, that I deserved better than to be deceived. This admission caught me off guard. In 3 years, this was the first time she had said I deserved better. She continued, saying she always knew Michael might do this, like his father. Said they were identical, the same weakness. This was news. Judith had never talked about her ex-husband, only that he left when Michael was 5. I asked what she wanted me to do. She said it was up to me, but now I knew. And by the way, he wasn't in Chicago. She'd called his office, inquiring about how the presentation went. They told her there was no business trip. He'd taken vacation days. When she left, I remained completely bewildered. I called Michael. His phone was off. I texted, "Call me when you can. It's important." That night, I didn't sleep. I opened Michael's laptop. I knew the password. He'd never hidden it. I logged into his email, his calendar. And indeed, there was no conference in Chicago, but there was a note in the calendar for these days. Vacation, reservation, Grand Plaza Hotel. The Grand Plaza Hotel is in our city, downtown. I went to his cloud photo storage. Among recently added pictures, several shots from a restaurant, the same one Judith had mentioned. In one of them, a reflection in a mirror where that same red-haired woman is visible. She's taking a selfie, and in the background, a silhouette resembling Michael. In his browser history, I found searches for best restaurants for romantic dinner, jeweler reviews, and a receipt from a jeweler for an amount that made me whistle. Date, 3 days ago. At 3 a.m, I finally checked his bank statements, which I have access to since we planned our joint budget. I found payments at a restaurant located right in that same Grand Plaza Hotel, and a room charge, not for one night, but for all 5 days of his business trip. Everything fit together. The pink card. Emily, that's who was behind the initial E, the new cologne. His lack of interest in me in recent months. But why had his mother chosen to intervene now? What was driving her? Concern for me or the desire to control her son? In the morning, my phone rang. The display showed Michael. His voice sounded worried. He said he'd received my message and asked what had happened. I asked how the conference was going, trying to keep my voice normal. He replied it was fine, lots of work, apologized for not calling. I asked which hotel he was staying at. There was a pause. Then he answered, "The Windy City Inn." I asked about the weather in Chicago. Michael noted that I was acting strangely and asked what was going on. I replied nothing special, just that I'd talked to his mother yesterday and she'd said some interesting things. A long silence followed. Then he asked in a tense voice what exactly she had said. I told him that he wasn't in Chicago, that he was actually at the Grand Plaza Hotel with Emily. Michael swore and exclaimed, "Is she following me? Taking pictures? This is paranoia." So it was true. I had expected denial, excuses, but not this direct confirmation. I asked if it was really true. My voice sounded unnaturally calm. He said it was complicated, that we needed to talk, but not on the phone. I agreed we needed to talk and asked when he would return. He said he'd come home that evening. The whole day passed as if in a fog. I went to work, did things mechanically. Colleagues asked if everything was okay. I nodded, smiled, said I just hadn't slept well. At lunch, Judith called and asked if I'd talk to him. I said yes, and that he was coming home that evening. She said she would come too. I objected more sharply than I'd intended, saying this was our business. I added that I appreciated the information, but we would handle it ourselves. She insisted that he would deny everything, make excuses, and that she knew her son. I replied that I knew my husband, though I wasn't sure of that anymore. I asked her to give us a chance to talk privately. She reluctantly agreed, but I felt this wasn't the end. She's not one to back down easily. In the evening, I sat in the living room, waiting. Questions without answers spun in my head. Why? When did it start? What did I do wrong? I heard the key in the lock. Michael entered with the same suitcase he'd left with, supposedly for Chicago. He looked tired, but not from work, from lying. He greeted me quietly. I responded and asked how the conference went. He looked at me for a long moment and said, "Kate, let's not do this. I know that you know." I asked what exactly I knew. That he lied about the business trip? That he spent 5 days in a hotel with a woman named Emily? That he bought her jewelry for a sum that would cover a month of our mortgage? Michael sat across from me, covered his face with his hands, said he didn't want things to turn out this way, that it all started accidentally. A business meeting, then another. That he hadn't planned to get involved in anything serious. I asked if he loved her. He didn't answer. I asked how long it had been going on. He said 3 months. That's exactly when I noticed the first changes. New haircut, new cologne, late returns from work. I asked why. He shrugged, said that with her he felt alive. That we had long become like roommates. That for the past 6 months, we rarely really talked, rarely made love. This was true, but hearing it was painful, as if he was shifting the blame to me. I told him so. He started to defend himself, saying that's not what he meant. But then his face suddenly changed and he asked how I knew about Emily. I told the truth, from his mother. Michael paled, then flushed with anger. He exclaimed, "She was following me, taking pictures, interfering in my life as always." I asked why he was so concerned that his mother knew, rather than that he had betrayed me. He had no answer. Then he asked if his mother had shown me the photos. I confirmed. He began pacing the room, muttering something about invasion of privacy, about manipulation. At some point, he turned to me and said bitterly, "You trust my mother more than me. This was too much." I raised my voice, asking how I could trust him when he'd lied to my face. when he said he was in Chicago while he was in a hotel 20 minutes from our home. He sat down again, quieted. Then he started talking about how hard it was for him, caught between me and his mother, how he always felt torn in two, that his mother had always interfered in his choices, his relationships, that this affair with Emily was partly his rebellion against all of that. I listened, not believing my ears. Rebellion? At 32? By cheating on his wife? Michael continued talking, more confused, more chaotic, about his childhood, his mother's manipulations, about how he always felt he wasn't good enough for me. That maybe things with Emily started because she admired him unconditionally, didn't compare him to anyone. All his words sounded like self-justification, an attempt to escape responsibility. At some point, I stopped listening. I interrupted him and asked directly, "Do you want to be with her?" He fell silent, lowered his eyes, then said quietly, "I don't know. I'm confused. I need time to think." That was an answer. Not the one I'd hoped for, but an answer. I told him he should leave, pack what he needed, and go. Think somewhere else, not in our house. He looked at me with surprise, as if he hadn't expected such determination. Then he nodded, went to the bedroom, and started packing things in the same bag he'd just returned with. Half an hour later, he stood at the door, asked if we could talk in a few days when we'd both calmed down. I said I didn't know, that right now I needed to be alone. After he left, the house felt huge and empty. I walked from room to room, restless. In the bedroom, I noticed his phone on the nightstand, forgotten in his hurry, or left deliberately. I knew I shouldn't look, that it was an invasion of his privacy. But after all the lies, after everything that had happened, what difference did it make? I unlocked the screen. The password hadn't changed since our wedding, the date of our first meeting. I opened the messages. Conversations with Emily, dozens, hundreds of messages, photos, plans, promises. There were also messages from Judith, many, several times a day. "Mikey, you forgot to call." "Mikey, I made your favorite soup." "Mikey, I saw you yesterday at the restaurant. Why didn't you come say hello?" And his replies, short, often irritated. "Mom, I'm busy." "Mom, I have my own life." The last message from her, sent this morning. "I told Catherine. She deserves to know the truth." "I'm sorry, son, but this is better for everyone." His response, "You always say that, but it only ever gets better for you." I sat staring at the screen, and suddenly many things became clear. This woman, who had always been between us, whom I perceived as an enemy, she wasn't fighting me. She was fighting for her son, for his attention, for his love. I was a threat to her world, where Mikey was always her little boy. Perhaps at some point, I stopped fighting, stopped proving that I was worthy of being with her son. And he stopped too, fighting for our relationship, for our love. Emily wasn't the cause. She was a symptom, the result of everything that had accumulated over years, unspoken, unprocessed. The phone rang. The display showed Judith. I didn't answer. What could I say to her? Thank you for destroying what little we had left? Or thank you for opening my eyes? Both options seemed wrong. In the morning, I packed his things into boxes. Not everything, just the essentials. Called work, took a day off. Wanted to call a friend, but didn't know what to say. My husband left me sounded too final. My husband is having an affair, too cliché. Around noon, he texted, I'm at my mom's, "Can I pick up some things?" I replied, "I packed the essentials. Come by." He arrived an hour later. He looked rough, rumpled, sleep-deprived. Said he'd spent the night on his mother's couch, that they'd argued, but he had nowhere else to go. I silently pointed to the boxes in the hallway. He began loading them into his car. When he finished, he paused in the doorway, as if wanting to say something. I waited. Apologies, explanations, promises, but he just asked, "Are you okay?" I wanted to laugh but nodded instead, said I would be, that I needed time. He nodded in response, said he'd call in a few days when we'd both had time to cool off. I replied that he shouldn't, that I would call when I was ready to talk. After he left, I sat on the floor in the entryway and sobbed. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to cry it all out. The hurt, the pain, the disappointment. I sat like that for maybe an hour. Then I got up, washed my face, made some tea. The phone rang again. Judith? This time I answered. She asked how I was holding up. In her voice was genuine concern, but something else too, satisfaction. She said Michael was with her now, very upset, barely eating, that he had always been a sensitive boy, inherited that from his father. Then she suggested I come over, have tea, talk. Said that now that we'd both suffered from his actions, we could finally understand each other. I declined, politely but firmly. Said I needed time to be alone, to sort through my feelings, that I appreciated her concern, but it wasn't what I needed right now. She insisted. Said in such situations one shouldn't be alone, that she'd been through this, knew how painful it was, that she could help with advice, support. I refused again, felt irritation rising. Even now, couldn't she leave me in peace? Even now, she continued to control the situation. She was silent, then said with unexpected bitterness, "You've always rejected me, Catherine, always kept me at a distance, and I only wanted to help. Maybe if you'd listened to my advice, none of this would have happened." At that moment, something clicked inside me. All these years, I'd tried to measure up, to be good enough for her son, for her, constantly felt evaluated, insufficient, wrong. I told her directly I hadn't rejected her. I'd been defending myself from her criticism, her interference, her constant attempts to dictate how I should live, how I should love her son. That no advice would have saved our marriage because the problem was deeper, in this strange triangle where I was always the outsider. Judith listened in silence, then said quietly, almost in a whisper, "I always wanted only the best for him." I replied, "I know, so did I." With that, we ended the conversation, without goodbyes, without promises to call. In the following days, I immersed myself in work, arrived at the publishing house first, left last. Colleagues noticed the changes, but tactfully didn't ask. Only Marina, my boss, called me to her office and asked directly if everything was okay. I told her everything. She listened attentively, occasionally nodding. When I finished, Marina sighed and said she'd gone through something similar 10 years ago. That it seemed then like life was over, but now she remembers that time as the beginning of real freedom. Then she offered me work on a new project, a series of books for teenagers. Said it would help to occupy my mind with something interesting. I agreed. Indeed, work helped me not to think about what had happened, not to replay endless what-ifs and whys in my head. A week later, Michael called. his voice uncertain, as if afraid I wouldn't answer. Said he'd like to meet, talk, that a week of living apart had clarified many things for him, that he realized how important our family was to him, our marriage. I asked directly, "What about Emily?" He replied that it was over, that it had been a mistake, an infatuation, that he'd talked to her, explained the situation, that he now understood how much he stood to lose. I listened and felt nothing. No joy, no relief, not even triumph. Just fatigue and a kind of inner emptiness. I said I needed more time, that I wasn't ready to return to our former life as if nothing had happened, that he'd betrayed my trust, and that couldn't be fixed in a week. He insisted on meeting, said we couldn't discuss everything by phone, that we needed to see each other. Finally, I agreed to a coffee shop, neutral territory, a public place. We met at a small cafe near my work. He looked better than the day he'd collected his things, but still lost. Told me he'd moved out from his mother's, rented an apartment, that they'd had a big fight. She kept calling Emily, threatening her. I listened silently, then asked what he wanted from me, from us. Michael said he wanted to come home, start with a clean slate, that he was ready for couples therapy, for anything that would help rebuild trust. I looked at him and realized I didn't believe. Not in his sincerity, he probably really believed what he was saying. I didn't believe we could start fresh, that I could forget the betrayal, the lies, how easily he'd discarded our relationship for something new and exciting. I told him this, calmly, without accusations, that perhaps his infatuation with Emily was a symptom of deeper problems between us. That I didn't want to return to a relationship where I would constantly be waiting for the next betrayal. He listened, head bowed, then asked quietly, "Do you want a divorce?" "I want peace," I answered honestly. With that, we parted. He promised not to rush me, to give me time to think, said he would wait as long as necessary. 2 more weeks passed. Life was gradually improving. Work on the new book series proved fascinating. I met new authors, illustrators, started socializing more with friends I'd somewhat neglected during the marriage. And then Judith appeared again, came without warning, rang the doorbell. I opened it without asking who it was. Out of habit, an old reflex. She looked aged, gaunt. In her hands, she held some kind of box. "May I come in?" she asked in an unusually quiet voice. I invited her to the kitchen, offered tea. She sat, placed the box on the table, said she'd come to apologize. This was so unexpected that I didn't know how to respond. She continued, said she'd been thinking a lot these past weeks, about herself, her son, me, about her role in everything that had happened, that she realized how strongly she'd influenced Michael all his life, how she hadn't allowed him to become independent, how she may have pushed him toward this rebellion, the affair with Emily. I listened skeptically. This didn't sound like the Judith I knew, admitting mistakes, taking responsibility. She opened the box. Inside, old photographs, letters, some documents. She started showing me photographs. Michael as a child, her young and beautiful, and a man I'd never seen, tall, with familiar features. Michael's father. She told me they'd met in college, that it was a great love, that he was a talented engineer with great promise. But then his career stalled. Problems with alcohol began, and other women. She endured for a long time, for her son's sake, for the family. Tried to control everything, keep everything in hand. Then he left for another woman, younger, more carefree, and she was left alone with a 5-year-old child. She vowed then that she would do everything to ensure her son didn't repeat his father's fate, to make him strong, successful, reliable, to ensure he never betrayed anyone the way her husband had betrayed her. And so, she concluded with bitter irony, I was so afraid he would become like his father that I pushed him toward it with my own hands. I was silent, trying to process what I'd heard. This unexpected confession suddenly explained so much. Her attitude toward me, her control over her son, her fears. Judith said she'd talked with Michael, that he truly wanted to return, to save our marriage, that he was ashamed and hurt by his actions. Then she added quietly, "But it's your decision, Kate. Only yours." For the first time, she'd used my nickname. For the first time, she spoke to me as an equal, as a person whose feelings and decisions mattered. She left, leaving the box of photographs. Said she wanted me to better understand Michael, his past, his fears. That evening, I spent a long time going through those old pictures, letters, the history of a family that had become part of my life, but which I'd never truly known. The next day, I called Michael, suggested we meet, not at a cafe, but at my home, our home. He came with flowers, but without a suitcase. He understood this wasn't yet a reconciliation. We talked for a long time about what had happened, about what led to it, about his relationship with his mother, my feelings about it, about what we both wanted and didn't want in this relationship. It was probably the most honest conversation in our entire marriage. Without accusations, without justifications, just the truth, however painful it might be. At the end, he asked if he could come home. I said I wasn't ready yet, that I needed time to understand what I really wanted, whether we had a future or if it was better to let each other go. He accepted this with understanding, said he would wait for my decision, that he understood how deeply he'd hurt me and didn't expect quick forgiveness. As he was leaving, I hugged him for the first time since everything had been revealed. Not as a wife hugs a husband, but as one person embraces another who was once very close and dear. Now I'm living day by day, working on the new project, meeting friends sometimes, seeing Michael. We're slowly trying to build something new on the ruins of the old. Sometimes I think we have a chance. Sometimes that it's better to let go of the past and start with a clean slate, alone. Judith calls once a week, not me, Michael. But now these conversations are shorter, with more respect for boundaries. Once she invited us both to dinner. We went. It was awkward, strange, but without the former tension. I don't know what will happen next. Forgiving betrayal is difficult. Forgetting, impossible. But maybe we can build something new, more honest, more open than what we had before. Or maybe not. Maybe some wounds are too deep to ever fully heal. But I've understood one thing that helps me move forward. Sometimes truth comes from the person who hates you the most. And sometimes that truth, however painful it may be, is the only path to freedom.